In the heart of the distant Zyran Empire, Emperor Ralvik sat on his golden throne, his eyes fixed on the vast courtyard below. The courtyard was enormous, filled with jagged rocks and high walls designed to contain the emperor's greatest treasures, his dragons. These were not ordinary dragons. They were massive, winged creatures, their scales glinting like molten metal, eyes glowing with intelligence, and claws sharp enough to tear through the strongest armor. For years, they had been loyal guardians of the empire, symbols of power and control. Yet now, the emperor felt a chill in his heart, a fear he had never known. The dragons had grown wild. Once calm and obedient, they now roared through the palace grounds without warning. Their wings beat the air like storm clouds, their flames turned stone to ash, and their claws shredded the banners of the imperial palace. Guards tried to calm them, but even the strongest soldiers were forced to retreat. Every attempt to approach the dragons ended in destruction. Ralvik had ruled for decades and faced countless threats, yet he had never felt powerless. Until now. He could hear the dragons' roars echoing in the palace halls, shaking the chandeliers and rattling the floor beneath him. The sound made his chest tighten. He had summoned his closest advisors, hoping for guidance, but they looked just as worried as he felt. "Your Majesty," said General Torin, a tall, stern officer, "we cannot contain them. They have broken free from all control. Even the dragon tamers refuse to approach." Ralvik's gaze did not leave the courtyard. One of the dragons, a black-scaled giant named Targan, had climbed the highest palace wall, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its eyes seemed to pierce through him. The emperor swallowed hard. "I have ruled this empire for 36 years, Ralvik said, his voice steady but quiet, "and I have never feared anything. Not wars, not assassins, not even the void of space. But these dragons, they do not listen. They do not obey. I cannot approach them." A murmur ran through the advisors. Fear was rare in the presence of the emperor. For him to speak of fear openly was almost unheard of. "Then what can we do?" asked Minister Yara, her silver robes shimmering as she stepped closer. "We have tried everything. The dragon tamers, the fireproof shields, even the containment spells. Nothing works. If they continue this way, the palace will be destroyed, and the people will panic." Ralvik clenched his fists. "I need someone who is not afraid. Someone who can think differently. Someone outside our ways." There was silence. Everyone knew what he meant, but the idea seemed absurd. "You mean, a human?" General Torin asked cautiously. Ralvik nodded. Humans had only recently begun traveling the stars. They were a small, fragile species, weaker than almost every alien race in the Empire. Yet they were known for their cleverness, their ability to solve problems that others could not. One human, in particular, had caught the Emperor's attention. Tomar, a mechanic, had arrived with a trade caravan from a distant star system. He was small, quiet, and unassuming, but his reputation for fixing machines, vehicles, and devices was unmatched. "Bring him here," Ralvik commanded. "If a human can approach the dragons, perhaps he can tame them in ways we cannot. If he fails, we have no other hope." The advisors exchanged nervous glances. The idea of a human facing the dragons was dangerous. Yet the emperor's word was final. Within hours, Tomar stood before the emperor. He was shorter than most aliens, with broad hands and bright eyes that missed nothing. He carried a small toolkit, curious gadgets, and an air of confidence that seemed out of place in the Grand Palace. "Your Majesty," Tomar said respectfully, bowing slightly. "I am ready to help." Ralvik studied him carefully. "You understand the risk?" he asked. "These dragons are not toys. One wrong move and they can kill you instantly. Why should I believe you can succeed where all our best warriors and tamers have failed?" Tomar smiled faintly. "Because I do not fear them the way you do. I will study their behavior, understand their instincts, and work with them, not against them. If I fail, you will know why humans are still new to this galaxy. Ralvik considered the words. There was something in the human's calmness that gave him hope. Perhaps this small, fragile being had the courage that he himself lacked in this moment. He nodded slowly. Very well. You will begin at once. The dragons are in the northern courtyard. Be careful. One wrong step could be your last. Tomar nodded and walked toward the courtyard. The Emperor followed from a safe distance, hiding behind a balcony as he watched the human approach the monsters he could not face himself. The courtyard was alive with chaos. Targan, the black-scaled dragon, spread its wings wide and roared, shaking the ground. Flames licked the palace walls, and the smaller dragons, Kiri and Jano, darted between rocks, screeching and snapping at guards. The air smelled of smoke and scorched stone. Tomar took a deep breath and observed. He did not raise a weapon or make sudden movements. Instead, he studied the dragons' movements carefully, noticing patterns in their behavior. The dragons were wild, yes, but not completely irrational. They responded to gestures, to sounds, to changes in the environment. Tomar began sketching designs in his notebook, calculating how to create harnesses and devices that could communicate with the dragons. The Emperor's heart pounded. Could a human really do this? Could a fragile mechanic tame creatures that had terrified an entire alien empire? Suddenly, one of the smaller dragons, Kiri, charged at Tomar. He froze for a moment, then knelt, extending a calm hand. Kiri slowed, circling him instead of attacking. Tomar spoke softly, moving carefully, observing the dragon's reactions. Slowly, the dragon's breathing steadied. It sniffed the human, then moved away, curious rather than hostile. Ralvik could hardly believe his eyes. The human had not been burned, torn apart, or thrown aside. He was standing unharmed among the dragons, studying them as if they were machines waiting to be understood. Impressive, whispered the Emperor. He felt a mixture of awe and relief. Perhaps hope was not lost after all. Tomar continued, noting every movement, every glance, every reaction. He would build the devices to guide the dragons, but first, he needed to understand them fully. And for the first time, Emperor Ralvik felt a strange sense of peace. The fear that had gripped him began to ease, replaced by curiosity. If a human could do this, perhaps the dragons could be tamed. Perhaps the empire could survive. And perhaps, just perhaps, the smallest beings could teach the greatest empires lessons in courage, intelligence, and understanding. The courtyard remained tense, the dragons still roaring and flying, but a new presence had entered. One that would change everything. Ralvik stepped back, watching silently. The dragons had not yet been tamed, but the human mechanic had already achieved something no one else could. The future of the empire now rested in the hands of someone unexpected. The morning sun shone across the Zyran palace courtyard, reflecting off jagged rocks and the scales of dragons that roamed freely. Emperor Ralvik observed from a safe balcony above, his eyes following the small figure of Tomar as he moved carefully among the dragons. Tomar's presence was calm, his movements measured and confident. He carried no weapons, no shields, only a small toolkit and his sharp mind. The dragons eyed him warily, their claws scratching stone, wings spreading wide, and eyes glowing with curiosity and suspicion. Kiri, the smallest dragon, crept closer, testing him, while Targan, the massive black-scaled dragon, circled above, flames curling from its nostrils. Jano, the third dragon, stomped in irritation, growling at every move Tomar made. Tomar crouched low and began to inspect the courtyard. He studied each dragon's movements, noting how they paced, how their tails flicked, and how their wings shifted the air. Unlike the palace guards, who saw only danger, he saw patterns. He saw logic in chaos. They are wild, but not uncontrolled, Tomar muttered to himself. They respond to attention and space. They respond to energy and rhythm. Ralvik leaned over the balcony railing, intrigued. The human spoke softly, almost like he was talking to machines, yet the dragon seemed to respond. Kiri sniffed at Tomar's hand again, its tail swishing more slowly. Targan's roar echoed across the palace, yet Tomar did not flinch. He simply observed. He pulled out a small metal device from his toolkit, a compact machine with wires, levers, and sensors. He had spent hours studying dragon behavior in his notes and sketches, and this was his first experiment. The device was meant to send small vibrations that the dragons could feel, signals to guide their movements without using force. Easy now, Kiri, Tomar said calmly, holding the device near the dragon's leg. The dragon stepped back at first, but Tomar stayed still, his voice steady and low. Slowly, Kiri moved closer, sniffing the device. With a careful hand, Tomar attached it to the dragon's leg. The dragon tensed, then tested the new weight, shaking it slightly. Tomar adjusted the device, sending subtle pulses that mimicked the dragon's natural movement. Kiri blinked. Then it lowered its head. It did not roar. It did not strike. It stayed calm. Ralvik's jaw dropped. A human had done what years of tamers had failed to achieve. He had approached a dragon without fear, and the dragon had accepted him. Tomar looked up, nodding to himself. Good. First step complete, he said. Now the bigger ones. Targan, the massive black dragon, let out a deep rumble, as if warning the human to stay away. Its wings beat the air with incredible force, and the ground trembled. Tomar studied it carefully, noting how Targan moved its massive body, how it shifted weight from claw to claw, how its tail swept behind it. The dragon was powerful, yes, but not mindless. It had instincts and patterns that could be understood. Ralvik held his breath. He had never seen anyone look so calm in front of Targan. His guards whispered among themselves, worried, amazed, and unsure whether the human would survive the attempt. Tomar adjusted his devices, preparing to attach a larger one to Targan. He spoke in soft tones, almost as if he were singing. The vibrations from the device matched the rhythm of Targan's wings, sending signals that were familiar to the dragon's body. Targan roared and reared, but Tomar moved slowly, never taking his eyes off the dragon. After several tense minutes, Targan lowered its head, sniffing the device. The pulse from the machine synchronized with its movements, and the massive dragon paused, seeming to think. Tomar adjusted the settings slightly, keeping the dragon calm but alert. Slowly, Targan allowed the device to be secured. Ralvik could not believe what he was seeing. A human had just tamed part of a dragon without using force. The Emperor's fear began to lessen, replaced with astonishment and hope. Jano, the third dragon, stomped angrily. It wanted attention, too. Tomar moved toward Jano with careful steps, holding a smaller device. The dragon hissed, trying to intimidate him, but Tomar did not back away. He studied Jano's reactions, noting its aggressive stance and quick movements. Using subtle vibrations, he coaxed the dragon into a calm state. The dragon's tail flicked less violently. Its breathing slowed. Soon, it allowed Tomar to attach the device, stepping back but not attacking. The dragons were not fully tamed yet, but they were responding. They were learning to trust him, to follow his signals, and to understand that he was not a threat. Ralvik leaned closer to the balcony edge. Incredible, he whispered. He is doing what I could not. Tomar stood up, taking a step back to observe all three dragons together. He raised his hands slowly, signaling them to move in a small circle. At first, they hesitated, uncertain. But then, following the pulses from the devices, they moved as he guided them, circling in a controlled pattern. Their movements were not perfect, but they were coordinated. Ralvik's advisors gasped. This was more than taming, this was understanding. The human did not use force. He used knowledge, observation, and technology combined with patience. The dragons, fierce as they were beginning to follow him. Your Majesty, Tomar said, glancing up at the balcony, they are responding. They are intelligent, and they can learn. If we continue this way, we can calm them and gain their loyalty without harming them. We only need time and understanding. Ralvik's heart lifted. He had feared failure, destruction, and chaos. Yet now, he saw a solution in front of him. This small, human mechanic was turning fear into control, chaos into harmony. He realized that the strength of humans was not in their size or power, but in their mind and courage. As the sun rose higher, Tomar continued his careful work. The dragons moved more confidently, following subtle signals and understanding the humans' intentions. Guards and palace workers watched from a distance, still cautious but slowly gaining hope. Even the palace birds and animals seemed to sense the change, no longer fleeing in panic. Ralvik remained silent, feeling a new respect growing within him. Perhaps humans, the smallest and weakest species in the galaxy, could teach even emperors about bravery, intelligence, and patience. Perhaps the dragons, once feared and uncontrollable, could become allies, not threats. For the first time in days, the emperor smiled. The dragons had not been tamed yet, but a human had taken the first step, and that step was giant. The sun climbed higher over the Zyran palace, casting long shadows of the dragons across the courtyard. Tomar stood at the center, his small frame almost swallowed by the enormous space and the creatures surrounding him. Kiri, the smallest dragon, had begun moving confidently near him, while Jano followed cautiously. Targan, the black-scaled giant, watched from above, wings spread wide and eyes bright with curiosity. Tomar adjusted the devices on each dragon, checking the vibrations and signals. He had studied their behavior carefully and knew that any sudden movement could trigger aggression. Every pulse, every motion of his hands, was calculated to earn their trust. Ralvik watched from the balcony, his heart pounding. He had never seen such calm determination in the face of danger. Tomar, a fragile human compared to the dragons, seemed fearless. The emperor could only imagine what would happen if the dragons decided to strike. Tomar knelt by Kiri first. We begin small, he said quietly, touching the dragon's scaled snout. Kiri hissed lightly but did not move away. The vibrations from the device adjusted, matching the rhythm of the dragon's breathing. Slowly, Kiri lowered its head and allowed Tomar to guide it in a short circle. Good, Tomar murmured. He smiled faintly. You can do this. Just follow the signals. Kiri's movements were not perfect, but they were controlled. The dragon followed the path Tomar indicated, responding to his careful guidance. Tomar stood and took a deep breath. It was time for the bigger challenge. Targan swooped down suddenly, wings beating hard enough to stir dust and small rocks. Its roar shook the courtyard, and palace guards instinctively stepped back. Tomar did not flinch. Instead, he studied the dragon, noting how it moved, how its tail swung, how it balanced its massive weight on the stone floor. You are the leader here, Tomar said softly, not as a command but as an observation. I only want to guide, not fight. He activated the larger harness, designed specifically for Targan. The device was heavy, but Tomar lifted it carefully, keeping his movements slow. Targan let out another roar, flames licking the air, yet it did not attack. The dragon's eyes narrowed, studying the human with a mix of caution and curiosity. Ralvik held his breath. One wrong move, and the palace could be in ruins. The human could be gone in an instant. Tomar approached Targan slowly, keeping the device between them like a shield and a bridge. Targan's massive claws dug into the stone, sparks flying as it tested his presence. Tomar paused, letting the dragon calm itself. Then he spoke softly, in a tone both firm and gentle, sending signals through the device. The pulses matched the dragon's heartbeat and breathing rhythm. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, incredibly, Targan lowered its head slightly, sniffing the device. It stepped back, testing the vibrations, and slowly, very slowly, allowed Tomar to attach the harness to its thick, black-scaled chest. Ralvik exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. The human had done it. He had approached a dragon that even the most skilled warriors feared and survived. But the challenge was not over. Jano, the last dragon, stomped angrily, wings flaring. It hissed and snapped, clearly frustrated that the human had approached Targan. Tomar turned his attention to Jano, pulling out the smaller device and kneeling carefully. The dragon lunged, and Tomar rolled to the side, staying low and calm. He adjusted the device's signals, sending pulses that matched the dragon's own movements. Jano froze, confused by the rhythm. Tomar spoke softly. "Easy now. You are not in danger. Follow me, and you will see it is safe." Slowly, the dragon allowed the device to be secured. Its tail flicked once, twice, but it did not attack. Instead, it tested the vibrations, moving cautiously with the signals. Tomar guided Jano in a small circle around the courtyard, and to everyone's astonishment, the dragon followed perfectly. Ralvik felt a mixture of pride and awe. He had ruled this empire for decades and faced countless enemies, but he had never seen anything like this. A human, small and fragile, had tamed dragons that had terrified even the bravest aliens. Tomar stepped back, observing all three dragons. They moved together in a controlled pattern, responding to his signals. Kiri was confident, Jano cautious but obedient, and Targan majestic, powerful, yet calm. The Emperor realized that the dragons were not being forced, they were learning to trust him. "This is only the beginning," Tomar said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "They are intelligent creatures. They respond to understanding, not fear. If I continue, I can guide them further, teach them, and help them become allies instead of threats." Ralvik nodded silently. The fear he had felt earlier was fading. Perhaps the human could do what no alien could. Perhaps the dragons could become controlled, their immense power harnessed for the Empire's protection instead of destruction. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the courtyard. Targan had sensed something beyond Tomar's presence, a disturbance at the palace gates. The massive dragon spread its wings, ready to defend its territory. Tomar remained calm. He signaled with the device, sending pulses that matched the dragon's natural rhythm. Slowly, Targan lowered its wings slightly, responding to the signals rather than instinctive aggression. Kiri and Jano followed suit, their movements coordinated, as if they understood that the human was guiding them. The palace guards, watching from a distance, whispered in astonishment. They had expected chaos, but instead, they saw control, discipline, and intelligence. Ralvik stepped back from the balcony, feeling a strange sense of hope. The human had done more than approach the dragons. He had begun to tame them without fear, without force, using only knowledge, observation, and patience. Tomar moved among the dragons, checking the devices and adjusting signals. Each pulse was precise, each movement calculated. The dragons responded, their eyes following him, their muscles tense but obedient. He smiled faintly, realizing that he had earned their trust. "This is the first step," he said quietly. "The first of many. Soon, you will not only obey but understand guidance. You will become allies, not threats." The dragons roared again, this time not in anger but in recognition. They lifted their heads, wings flaring, acknowledging the human who had tamed them without harm. Tomar had proven that intelligence, patience, and courage could overcome raw strength and fear. Ralvik watched in amazement. A human, small and seemingly weak, had achieved what the greatest of aliens could not. For the first time, he felt a deep respect for the species that had traveled the stars. Perhaps humans, with their creativity and courage, could change the course of the Empire's future. As the sun climbed higher, Tomar continued his careful guidance. The dragons moved around him, responding to his signals, learning, and adapting. The courtyard, once a place of chaos and destruction, became a place of controlled power, where strength was guided by intelligence. Ralvik felt a new sense of hope. The Empire's most dangerous creatures were no longer beyond control. And the smallest human among them had shown that courage, understanding, and ingenuity could achieve what raw power could not. For the first time, the Emperor believed that harmony between humans and dragons was possible. And he knew that the future of his empire might depend on the small, clever human who had faced his greatest fears and tamed them with skill and patience. The sun was high in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard. Tomar stood among the dragons, calm and focused, adjusting the devices and observing their movements. Kiri moved confidently, Jano followed cautiously, and Targan, the massive black-scaled dragon, watched from above. The smaller dragons seemed to understand the human, but Targan remained the ultimate challenge. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. Targan's eyes narrowed, and its wings lifted, creating a gust of wind strong enough to knock over the nearest guard. Tomar took a careful step back, keeping his hands steady. The dragon's gaze locked onto him, and it let out a roar that echoed across the palace walls. Ralvik, watching from his balcony, held his breath. This was the moment he had feared. Targan was testing the human. If Tomar failed, the palace would be in chaos, and the dragons would be unstoppable. Tomar stayed calm. He knew the dragon was not attacking out of pure malice. It was testing boundaries, asserting its power. He had studied Targan's behavior carefully, noticing how the dragon shifted its weight, how it flexed its claws, and how it used its wings to intimidate. Knowledge was his weapon, patience his shield. "Easy, Targan," Tomar said softly, holding up the harness device. "I am not your enemy. Follow the signals, and nothing will harm you." Targan growled, lifting a massive claw and slamming it into the stone floor. Sparks flew, and the courtyard shook. Guards stepped back, some trembling with fear. Yet Tomar did not move. He activated the pulses in the harness, sending vibrations that matched the dragon's own rhythm. The signals were subtle, almost invisible, but Targan could feel them. The dragon roared again, more loudly this time, and charged toward Tomar. Dust and small stones flew as Targan's claws scraped the ground. The human did not panic. Instead, he timed his movements carefully, rolling to the side just as the dragon's tail swiped past him. He adjusted the harness, sending precise signals to guide Targan's energy safely. The massive dragon skidded to a stop, inches from Tomar, flames licking the air. It sniffed the device, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Tomar spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I am not here to harm you. Follow me, and you will see it is safe." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, incredibly, Targan's head lowered slightly, its eyes still wary but attentive. Tomar raised his hand slowly, sending a gentle pulse through the harness. The dragon's muscles relaxed, its tail stopping its aggressive swings. Targan stepped back, allowing the human to guide it with signals rather than force. Ralvik exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. The human had faced the dragon's full strength and survived. More than that, he had earned a level of respect from the creature, something no one else had ever achieved. Kiri and Jano, observing the exchange, moved closer to Tomar, sensing the calm energy. They followed his gestures, circling him in a controlled pattern. The courtyard, once a place of chaos, now hummed with a strange harmony. The dragons were still fierce, powerful, and majestic, but they were no longer wild and untamed. Tomar adjusted the signals, testing Targan's reactions. The dragon flinched slightly but did not attack. Instead, it began moving in small circles, following the pulses from the harness. The human guided it carefully, step by step, ensuring the dragon understood the instructions. Ralvik could hardly believe his eyes. A human, small and seemingly fragile, was guiding the greatest dragon of his empire without fear or force. It was a display of intelligence and courage that no alien, no matter how powerful, had ever shown. Suddenly, a loud screech echoed from the palace gates. Another dragon, from the outer stables, had sensed the disturbance and was approaching. Targan's wings flared, ready to defend the territory. Tomar's heart raced, but he remained calm. He signaled Targan to stay close and guided Kiri and Jano to position themselves strategically. The new dragon arrived, larger than Kiri and Jano but smaller than Targan. It circled the courtyard, wings flapping, flames flickering from its mouth. Tomar observed carefully, noting its movements and reactions. Using his devices, he sent signals that matched the new dragon's natural rhythm, coaxing it into a calm state. Slowly, the dragon landed, wings folding, and allowed the human to approach. Ralvik was amazed. The human was not just taming one dragon, he was beginning to control multiple dragons at once, using understanding, observation, and technology. It was not fear that controlled the dragons, it was knowledge. Tomar moved between the dragons, adjusting devices, sending pulses, and guiding their movements. Kiri moved confidently, Jano followed cautiously, Targan majestically, and the new dragon learned quickly, responding to each signal. The courtyard became a stage of controlled power, where strength and intelligence worked together. Ralvik realized something important. Humans, though small and seemingly weak, had a unique ability to understand and adapt. They could approach problems differently, using observation and creativity rather than brute force. This human, Tomar, had shown that courage and intelligence could achieve what raw strength could not. Targan, now calm but alert, lowered its head to Tomar's level. The human reached out and touched the dragon's scaled snout gently. The dragon blinked, not in fear, but in recognition. Tomar smiled. He had earned the dragon's trust. This is only the beginning, Tomar said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. They are learning. They are beginning to understand guidance. Soon, they will follow without hesitation, not out of fear, but out of respect. The dragons roared in response, a sound that was both powerful and harmonious. They were no longer attacking, no longer wild. They were listening, learning, and responding. Tomar had achieved something remarkable, he had turned chaos into cooperation. Ralvik felt pride and awe. He had feared the dragons, feared the destruction they could cause. Yet now, he understood that the humans' courage and intelligence had made the impossible possible. The dragons, once untamable, were beginning to follow guidance, and the Empire's future looked brighter than it had in years. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the courtyard, Tomar continued his careful work. The dragons moved in coordinated patterns, responding to his signals, learning from him, and respecting his presence. The palace, once threatened by uncontrolled fire and claws, had become a place of harmony and controlled power. Ralvik stepped back from the balcony, feeling hope for the first time in days. The human had faced the Empire's greatest fear and succeeded. The dragons were still strong, still powerful, but now they could be guided, controlled, and used to protect the Empire rather than threaten it. For the first time, the Emperor believed that humans, small and fragile though they were, could bring intelligence, courage, and ingenuity to the greatest challenges. Tomar had shown that even the most feared creatures could be guided by understanding, patience, and skill. The future of the Zyran Empire had changed, and it had changed because of a human mechanic who dared to face the dragons and succeeded where others had failed. The courtyard of the Zyran Palace had changed. What was once chaos and destruction now held a strange harmony. Dragons moved with purpose, guided by subtle signals and devices that Tomar had created. Kiri, Jano, and Targan followed him, not with fear, but with attention. Even the palace guards, who had once trembled at every roar, now watched in awe. Tomar knelt beside Kiri, adjusting the device on the dragon's leg. "Good," he said softly. "You are learning to trust me. Soon, you will follow without needing the signals all the time." Kiri blinked its bright eyes and nudged Tomar gently, as if acknowledging his words. The human smiled. He had learned something important in the last few hours: dragons were intelligent. They were not beasts to be controlled with fear. They could understand guidance, respect, and patience. Ralvik watched from the balcony, feeling a mix of amazement and pride. He had feared these creatures, feared their power, yet this small human had not only approached them, but had begun forming a connection. The Emperor's respect for humans grew with every moment. Tomar turned his attention to Targan. The black-scaled giant towered over him, yet it did not attack. Instead, it watched, curious and alert. Tomar extended a hand and touched the dragon's scaled snout. Targan lowered its massive head, allowing the human to make contact. The vibration from the harness pulsed gently, matching the dragon's heartbeat. Tomar spoke softly, in tones that were calm and steady. "You are strong, Targan. You are smart. Together, we can do great things." The dragon blinked slowly, a sound echoing like a low rumble. It had accepted him. Tomar had achieved what no one else had. Jano moved closer, testing the human's presence. Tomar extended his hand, and the dragon sniffed, then allowed him to attach a small guiding device to its chest. It followed his signals carefully, learning to move in coordination with the others. The dragons were responding, but Tomar knew this was only the beginning. He wanted more than obedience. He wanted trust, loyalty, and understanding. And that required time, patience, and constant attention. He climbed onto a small rock, raising his hands to signal the dragons. Kiri responded first, moving in a circle around him. Jano followed, cautious but attentive. Targan lifted its massive wings and stepped carefully, matching the signals. The courtyard now held a rhythm, a coordination that had been impossible before. Tomar took a deep breath and smiled. "Good. Now, we take the next step." He had built a harness for riding, a device that would allow him to guide the dragons in flight without harming them. The dragons were strong, powerful, and potentially dangerous, but they were learning to follow guidance. Tomar approached Kiri first, carefully lifting himself onto the dragon's back. Kiri hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, wings lifting slightly. The human held the reins, sending subtle signals through the device. Kiri moved smoothly, responding to his guidance. Ralvik gasped. The human was riding the dragon with confidence. Kiri was following every command, yet it was clear the dragon had a will of its own. The harmony between human and dragon was evident. Next was Jano. Tomar adjusted the device, speaking softly to the dragon. It flinched at first, but then allowed him to mount its back. With careful signals, the dragon lifted its wings and moved in coordination with Kiri. The two dragons circled the courtyard, following Tomar's guidance. Finally, Targan. The black-scaled giant loomed over him, massive and intimidating. Tomar approached slowly, climbing onto its back with steady hands. Targan trembled slightly, testing the human's balance and intentions. Tomar sent signals through the harness, matching the dragon's own rhythm. Slowly, Targan moved, lifting its wings, circling the courtyard with controlled power. Ralvik could hardly believe his eyes. The human mechanic was riding the greatest dragons of the Empire, guiding them with skill, patience, and understanding. The palace guards whispered in amazement. They had seen dragons tamed before, but never like this. Never with such harmony. Tomar guided the dragons through more complex patterns, testing their coordination and responsiveness. Kiri led the smaller movements, Jano followed closely, and Targan, with its massive strength, moved with grace and precision. The dragons were learning, adapting, and responding to his guidance. After several hours, Tomar climbed down, smiling with satisfaction. The dragons gathered around him, their eyes bright and attentive. He reached out, touching each one gently. "You have done well," he said softly. "You are strong, smart, and capable. Together, we will protect this empire." Ralvik stepped forward from his balcony, finally approaching the dragons himself. He held out a hand toward Targan. The dragon lowered its massive head, allowing the emperor to touch it. Ralvik felt the power beneath his hands, yet also the intelligence and understanding. He realized that the human had taught him something important: strength alone was not enough. Guidance, patience, and respect were just as important. The emperor smiled. "You have done something remarkable, Tomar. Not just for the dragons, but for the empire. You have shown us the value of understanding, of courage, and of intelligence." Tomar nodded. "Thank you, Your Majesty. They are incredible creatures. With trust and guidance, they can do great things." Over the next few days, Tomar continued to work with the dragons, forming bonds that went beyond simple obedience. He rode them, trained them, and taught the palace guards how to approach them safely. The dragons responded to guidance rather than fear, and the palace began to function smoothly again. Ralvik observed quietly, learning from the human. He realized that courage came in many forms. Humans, small and fragile as they were, had a unique ability to understand, adapt, and teach. Tomar had shown that even the most powerful creatures could be guided through patience, knowledge, and respect. The dragons now followed him willingly. Kiri would nuzzle his hand, Jano would circle calmly, and Targan allowed the human to mount its back and guide it through the skies. They were no longer wild, dangerous beasts, but partners, allies, and friends. Ralvik's heart swelled with pride and respect. Humans, he realized, had a strength that went beyond physical power. They had courage, intelligence, and the ability to bring harmony to chaos. Tomar had shown that even the greatest challenges could be overcome through understanding and patience. The emperor finally spoke to his advisors. "We have underestimated humans. Their bravery and skill are unmatched. They bring something new to this empire, something we cannot ignore." Tomar continued to work with the dragons, forming a bond that would last for years. The dragons were no longer feared but respected, guided by the intelligence and courage of a human mechanic. The courtyard, once a place of danger and chaos, had become a symbol of cooperation, harmony, and the power of understanding. For the first time, Emperor Ralvik felt confident in the dragon's loyalty and strength. He knew that with Tomar's guidance, the dragons could protect the empire, respond to threats, and act with intelligence and purpose. And in that moment, he realized something profound: humans, small and fragile as they seemed, could achieve greatness beyond imagination. Through courage, patience, and understanding, they could tame what others feared, guide what others could not control, and bring hope where it was most needed. The courtyard stood quiet now, dragons calm and alert, humans learning and guiding, and the emperor watching in awe. A new chapter had begun for the Zyran Empire, one where humans and dragons worked together, building trust, loyalty, and a bond that would protect the future. The early morning sky over the Zyran Empire was calm, the palace courtyard quiet and orderly. Dragons soared above, guided by Tomar's devices, moving in patterns that showed both discipline and freedom. Kiri, Jano, and Targan flew side by side, wings beating powerfully, yet with a grace that matched the human's guidance. Tomar rode Targan, his eyes scanning the horizon, confident but alert. Ralvik stood on the balcony, observing. The dragons, once feared and uncontrollable, now responded to the human. Guards moved through the courtyard, learning from Tomar, assisting in maintaining the dragon's equipment, and preparing for any emergencies. The Empire felt alive with new hope. Suddenly, a warning bell rang from the outer walls. Ralvik's eyes widened as scouts reported a fleet of enemy ships approaching at high speed. The rival alien empire had learned of the dragon's power and sought to strike before the Zyran forces could respond. Chaos threatened once more, but this time Tomar and the dragons were ready. "Prepare the dragons," Ralvik commanded. Guards rushed to their posts, while Tomar signaled Kiri, Jano, and Targan to gather. The dragons responded immediately, moving into formation under his careful guidance. Tomar checked the devices, ensuring the signals would maintain control during battle. The enemy ships arrived, sleek and metallic, firing energy beams toward the palace walls. The first impact shook the ground, sending dust and debris flying. Kiri and Jano swooped down, flames from their mouths creating barriers of fire that redirected the enemy's attacks. Targan, massive and powerful, took to the air with Tomar on its back, leading the dragons in a coordinated strike. Ralvik watched in astonishment. The human had turned his most feared beasts into a disciplined, powerful defense force. Every movement was precise, every attack strategic. The dragons were no longer wild animals, they were intelligent warriors, responding to guidance and protecting their home. Tomar directed the dragons to circle above the enemy ships. Targan's massive wings created gusts that destabilized smaller ships, while Kiri and Jano swooped in quickly, their speed making them hard targets. Tomar adjusted the signals, guiding the dragons' movements to maximize their strength while minimizing risk. The enemy fired back, energy beams striking near the dragons. Targan roared and swung its massive tail, deflecting attacks. Kiri and Jano moved with lightning speed, avoiding damage while striking in return. The palace guards watched, inspired by the human's leadership and the dragon's skill. Ralvik could not speak, only watch. The human mechanic, small and seemingly fragile, had orchestrated a defense more effective than any alien general could have imagined. Tomar's courage and intelligence were unmatched, and the dragons had become extensions of his mind and skill. The enemy ships regrouped, sending their largest vessel forward. It fired a concentrated energy beam directly at the palace gates. Tomar reacted instantly, signaling Targan to intercept. The black-scaled dragon soared upward, the human guiding it precisely. Targan smashed into the beam's path, dispersing it with the force of its massive wings and creating a protective shield of fire. The enemy vessel faltered, struggling to maintain its attack. Kiri and Jano joined, flanking the ship, flames striking the hull. Sparks and energy bursts lit the sky, but the dragons moved with control, striking accurately without harming the palace or innocent bystanders. Tomar's guidance kept them coordinated, efficient, and focused. The battle raged for hours. The enemy ships were powerful, but they were unprepared for intelligent dragons under human command. Tomar adjusted the harness signals continuously, responding to every movement, guiding every maneuver. Kiri darted between ships, creating confusion, while Jano struck precise targets. Targan's immense power disrupted the enemy formation, forcing their vessels to retreat. Ralvik could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Humans, fragile as they seemed, had the ability to think, adapt, and lead in ways that even the strongest aliens could not. Tomar's courage, intelligence, and understanding of the dragons had turned what could have been disaster into victory. Finally, the last enemy ship attempted to flee. Targan, guided by Tomar, pursued it with unmatched speed. Kiri and Jano flanked the ship, forcing it to surrender. The remaining vessels retreated, leaving the Zyran Empire unharmed. The courtyard, once a place of fear and chaos, now stood calm and victorious. Dragons landed gracefully, breathing heavily but uninjured. Tomar dismounted from Targan, checking the devices and ensuring the dragons were safe. Guards and palace workers approached, cheering for the human and his incredible accomplishment. Ralvik stepped forward, awe and pride written on his face. He approached Tomar and bowed deeply. "You have done something extraordinary," he said. "You have saved the Empire, tamed the dragons, and shown a strength we never imagined humans possessed. You are not just a mechanic. You are a hero." Tomar smiled humbly. "I only did what needed to be done. The dragons are intelligent and strong. They only needed guidance. We all played our part, and together, we succeeded." Kiri nuzzled Tomar's hand, Jano circled happily, and Targan lowered its massive head, recognizing the human's leadership. The dragons were no longer wild, uncontrollable forces. They were allies, partners, and protectors. Ralvik looked around at the dragons, the humans, and the palace guards. The Empire had faced its greatest challenge, and victory had been won not by force alone, but by intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Humans, he realized, had a unique ability to solve problems and achieve greatness through understanding, creativity, and bravery. "Let this be remembered," Ralvik said to his advisors. "The Empire has learned a valuable lesson. Strength alone is not enough. Intelligence, courage, and cooperation are equally important. And humans, small as they are, can achieve greatness beyond our imagination." Tomar continued to care for the dragons, adjusting the devices, guiding their movements, and ensuring they remained calm and coordinated. The dragons had become more than weapons, they were now partners, capable of protecting the Empire with intelligence and strategy. The victory over the enemy fleet strengthened the Empire and cemented Tomar's place as a respected figure. The Emperor and his advisors began to trust humans in ways they had never considered before. The dragons, once feared as uncontrollable beasts, were now symbols of harmony and strength under human guidance. Ralvik finally approached Targan, placing his hand on the massive dragon's scaled head. The dragon blinked slowly, acknowledging the Emperor without aggression. The human mechanic had shown that courage, intelligence, and patience could achieve what strength and fear could not. The Zyran Empire had been tested, and it had survived, stronger than ever. The dragons, guided by Tomar, would now patrol the skies, protect the people, and serve the Empire with loyalty and intelligence. The Emperor knew that the future of his empire was secure, thanks to the small human who had tamed the dragons and turned fear into power. In that moment, Ralvik understood something profound: greatness is not measured by size or strength alone. It is measured by courage, intelligence, and the ability to inspire trust and cooperation. Tomar had proven this truth, and the Empire would remember his heroism for generations. The Zyran Palace courtyard was quiet now, bathed in the soft golden light of morning. Dragons soared above in perfect formation, their wings beating with power and precision. Kiri, Jano, and Targan moved gracefully through the skies, each responding to the subtle guidance of Tomar, who rode Targan with calm confidence. The human had become more than a mechanic, he was a leader, a guide, and a trusted friend to creatures once thought untamable. Ralvik watched from his balcony, pride swelling in his chest. The Emperor had feared the dragons, feared the destruction they could unleash. Yet now, under Tomar's guidance, the dragons had become protectors of the Empire, loyal, disciplined, and intelligent. The Emperor realized that the human's courage and insight had changed the Empire forever. "Prepare for inspection," Tomar said to the guards and assistants. His voice was calm but firm. "We will demonstrate their abilities and coordination. It is important that everyone sees what can be achieved with patience and understanding." Kiri swooped low, landing neatly at Tomar's side. Jano followed, circling before settling down with careful grace. Targan lowered its massive head, allowing Tomar to signal with a slight motion of his hand. The dragons responded instantly, moving in synchronized patterns, showcasing the training they had received over the past days. Ralvik's advisors and the palace guards gasped in awe. They had seen dragons fight and destroy before, but never like this. The creatures moved with intelligence, discipline, and trust. Their raw power was now matched by precision, all under the guidance of a human. Tomar guided the dragons through a series of maneuvers, demonstrating their ability to fly in formation, attack in coordinated patterns, and respond to changing commands quickly. Kiri darted and twisted, agile and precise. Jano followed with controlled speed, while Targan's immense power shaped the air and drew the eye with its majesty. The audience watched, amazed at the harmony between human and dragons. Ralvik stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd. "We have witnessed something extraordinary," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "These dragons, once feared and uncontrollable, are now disciplined allies. And it is thanks to a human, whose courage, intelligence, and patience have shown us a new way. Tomar has proven that greatness comes not from size or strength, but from understanding, determination, and skill." The Emperor's words carried weight. Humans had long been underestimated across the galaxy. Small, fragile, and seemingly weak, they had always been seen as minor players. Yet Tomar had shown that their greatest strength lay in creativity, intelligence, and the courage to face what others feared. Tomar dismounted from Targan, walking among the dragons to check their equipment and ensure they were calm. He patted Kiri on the head, stroked Jano's back, and placed a hand gently on Targan's massive scaled chest. The dragons responded, nuzzling him, acknowledging him not just as a rider, but as a guide, a partner, and a friend. Ralvik watched quietly, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. Strength alone could not protect an empire. Raw power was useless without intelligence and control. Tomar had shown that even the most dangerous creatures could be guided with patience, understanding, and respect. He had shown that humans, small and fragile as they seemed, could achieve greatness beyond imagination. Over the following days, Tomar continued to work with the dragons, training palace guards, teaching strategies, and forming bonds that strengthened the empire. Kiri, Jano, and Targan became not just symbols of power, but emblems of cooperation and trust. They patrolled the skies, protected the borders, and responded to emergencies with intelligence and precision. The people of the empire began to change their perception of humans. Stories spread of the small mechanic who had tamed the dragons and saved the palace from attack. Children whispered of Kiri, Jano, and Targan flying across the skies, guided by a human's steady hand. Humans were no longer underestimated, they were respected, admired, and trusted. Ralvik often spoke to Tomar privately. "You have shown me the true power of courage and intelligence," he said. "Humans have something unique, something we cannot replicate. You have earned a place not just in this palace, but in the history of the empire." Tomar smiled humbly. "I only did what was needed. The dragons are incredible creatures. With guidance and trust, they become more than powerful beasts. They become allies, protectors, and friends." Kiri nuzzled his hand, Jano circled playfully, and Targan lowered its head. The dragons had become extensions of Tomar's mind, his skill, and his patience. They were disciplined, loyal, and ready for any challenge. The empire flourished under this new alliance between humans and dragons. Trade routes were protected, enemy incursions prevented, and the people lived with a renewed sense of safety and confidence. Tomar's methods were adopted across the empire, training more humans to work with dragons, ensuring the creatures remained controlled yet free. Ralvik addressed the council and the people. "Let this be remembered," he said. "The Zyran Empire has learned a valuable lesson. Strength alone is not enough. Intelligence, courage, and cooperation are equally important. And humans, who we once underestimated, have proven their worth. They have changed the way we see the world, and they will play a vital role in our future." Tomar continued his work, riding Targan across the skies, guiding Kiri and Jano in formation, and teaching others the lessons he had learned. The dragons responded with intelligence and loyalty, understanding that their power could be guided by the mind, not just the body. The empire had changed forever. Humans were no longer small, insignificant beings. They were innovators, leaders, and heroes. Tomar had proven that courage, intelligence, and understanding could overcome the greatest challenges. Ralvik watched from the palace balcony as Tomar and the dragons flew across the horizon, moving in perfect harmony. He knew that the future of the empire was secure, not just because of the dragon's power, but because of humans like Tomar. They had the ability to change the impossible into reality, to tame what others could not, and to inspire greatness in everyone around them. For the first time in years, the emperor felt complete confidence in his empire's future. Humans had proven themselves indispensable, and the dragons, once feared, were now symbols of strength, intelligence, and cooperation. Tomar landed Targan gracefully in the courtyard, dismounting and patting the dragon's massive head. Kiri and Jano followed, nuzzling him affectionately. The palace guards, advisors, and Ralvik himself approached, bowing in respect. "You have done more than save the palace," Ralvik said, voice full of admiration. "You have shown us the true meaning of courage and intelligence. You have built a legacy that will be remembered for generations." Tomar smiled humbly. "I only did what I could. The dragons and I worked together. Their strength and intelligence, combined with patience and guidance, created this outcome. The real credit belongs to all of us." The dragons roared in acknowledgement, a sound that was powerful yet harmonious. They had become more than creatures of fear, they were symbols of trust, loyalty, and partnership. Humans had shown that courage and intelligence could overcome any challenge, and the empire would never forget it. As the sun set over the Zyran palace, the dragons rested in the courtyard, calm and alert. Tomar walked among them, checking the devices and ensuring their comfort. Ralvik watched, knowing that the future was safe, secure, and bright. Humans had proven their worth. Dragons had found guidance. And the Zyran Empire had a new legacy, one of courage, intelligence, and harmony between species.